Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. Kaguya Wants to be confessed to the Genius's War of Love and Brains is a phenomenal manga series that in recent months has catapulted to my top 3 currently printing manga series alongside Noragami and Haikyuu. And it was with equal parts excitement and dread that I received the news of the anime adaptation. Excitement because who doesn't love seeing their favorite characters and moments on screen brought to life? And dread because of the frustrating tendency for anime adaptations to be, shall we say, uninspired. Adaptation is not as simple as transplanting A to B. Changing narrative mediums is a significant undertaking. And while I would love to spend the next 20 minutes talking about the art of adaptation in a general sense, and I likely will eventually, I'd rather get into the nitty-gritty of this lone work than an entire cavalcade of material. So then, the reason why Kaguya's pilot episode is an excellent adaptation is because it respects the source material, while recognizing that it should serve as a jumping-off point as to empower the core narrative through an audio-visual medium instead of just being the manga with color, voice acting, and music. I think the first important thing to note is that from a production standpoint, Kaguya feels great. Animation looks crisp, voice actors are solid matches, the show has a strong vision, and every element from the color to the music complements that direction. If you're not chanting Love is War at the end of the OP, well, I guess it's just me, but you can tell that this is a show that had some thought and care put into it. And that's the critical element about respecting the source. When an adaptation is lazy or wasn't given the proper time, financing, staff, etc., it's readily apparent. But when the people making it care, you get stuff like One Punch Man, either the Murata manga version or the Madhouse anime version. Respecting the source doesn't mean blindly following it, it means getting to the core of what makes the narrative engaging, and then making sure that every element follows through on that. And you can tell that the team behind Kaguya recognized that the core in this early part of the manga's narrative is the absurd, over-the-top theatrical antics of Kaguya and Shirogane's relationship, while Fujiwara unwittingly destroys their best-laid plans. Understanding that as the core tenet, we can see how every decision builds into that, from additions to subtractions, or most clearly, the material chosen to adapt in the first episode. The first episode adapts chapters 1, 12, and 5 from the manga in that order, with the very end of chapter 12 being shuffled to the end of chapter 5 in lieu of an ED. You may be wondering, why not just adapt chapters 2 and 3 as to go linearly, especially when those 3 chapters also fill out a nice little storyline about the movie tickets, and it introduces a great character instead of just having her at the end of the episode and in the OP. The reason for this swap is that the core tenet has Fujiwara screwing up their schemes as an important element, and chapters 2 and 3 are devoid of her. Therefore, the change here is to keep Fujiwara involved and to establish her as the aspect of chaos. This decision will make future scenes with only Shirogane and Kaguya duking it out to have higher stakes, by making those moments feel less frequent and with more potential to actually determine a victor. In addition, Chapter 12's push to the end slyly introduces a character who can be used for surprise factor later in the show's run, while Chapter 5 gets at the relationship that the two leads have with Fujiwara in this early section of the show. I think this reordering is a wise decision for all of those reasons, and sufficient evidence for empowering the core narrative, even if the show didn't take advantage of all of those elements in the actual production. Every element of the production exists to build up the dramatic and theatrical nature of the scheming and strategizing, while adding small little additions to the original work to further highlight that narrative. A great example of this is the little pre-OP rule, a brand new addition where we go from a literal projection giving way to letterboxing, dramatic lighting, and literal weapons with each character's associated color, red for Kaguya and blue for Shirogane. Another solid addition is the bright transition to this 360 overview of the student council room, boldly setting the battlefield for the skirmishes to come in this episode and the many more to follow. This total commitment to showing the setting also helps to draw contrast when the production sets the characters in different backgrounds. These mesmerizing black and white patterns really add to the thought processes that they undergo. One of the great changes that the show makes in the first section is the establishment of the steam bun early on, in a great shot that places Fujiwara between the two, suggesting that she's preventing them from coming together. This enables the later shot of the table extending away to be all the more ridiculous, which in turn builds up the overly dramatic nature of the narrative. And there are plenty of other examples of this in the first section. The addition of the sweat dropping onto Shirogane's hand as Kaguya begins her assault, while a lightly sinister song plays in the background, are just set up for an eye-catching, stylized sequence. From beautiful additions like this shot, to the inspired decision to place a slight static roll on the screen, drawing influence from old CRTs, which instantly place us in Shirogane's headspace and adds to that slight discomfort from the music, as both score and camera build to the phrase that Shirogane is so afraid of. That half second of silence afterwards perfectly brings back the score for his counterattack. And the entire episode is filled with great decisions like this that empower the scenes from the manga. Other great additions include the use of a clock ticking, with the ticket swaying to provide urgency, the way Shirogane and Kaguya reflect the characters on the ticket in this shot, and the way that the score just perfectly stops with Fujiwara's additions every single time. The dramatic undercut provided by these moments cannot be overstated. Provides such a strong emotional contrast that immediately pulls you out of the current, as the narrative had purposefully dragged you into the combatant's perspective. The whiplash alone from one absurdity to the next provides a good laugh regardless of the spoken line or circumstance. The second section's climax makes a few great changes from the manga, by exorcising Fujiwara from our memory by panning away from her, using a cut to Shirogane's legs to remind us about his pants compared to the girl's skirts, and then implementing Shirogane's turn and cut to his pants before Fujiwara grabs Kaguya's shoulder. I could go through every scene and point out the small additions made from the corresponding manga chapters to improve the adaptation. And if there's a desire for it, let me know in the comments. But I personally feel as though I've proven my point about how the show uses the timing, visuals, and score to empower the absurd and dramatic nature of these little vignettes into the student council. The main thing I consider when experiencing an adaptation where I'm familiar with the source is whether it feels derivative. Presumably, the point of taking a narrative and putting it into new form is because the new medium can add something of value to the experience. We've only gotten one episode so far, but if this is the standard of quality that we can expect moving forward, Kaguya will not only remain a phenomenal manga series, but an anime adaptation that is a must watch.